Yeah, awesome, thank you. All right. So thank you for the introduction. I'm Joshua Duchesne, and I'll be presenting on this topic here, decentralized marketplaces and how they could be a global equalizer. Before we get too deep into this, I want to do a pop quiz. So what do you all think is the most visited tourist attraction in the world? Any ideas, any guesses? You can shout it out. Grand Canyon, Eiffel Tower, Times Square. Central Park. These are all really awesome guesses, and many of these are in the top of most visited tourist attractions. But you might be surprised, the most visited tourist attraction in the world is the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, Turkey. The Grand Bazaar, the #1 place visited in the world, is a marketplace, believe it or not.
That's so bizarre.
It is so bizarre, isn't it? How many people do you think visit this daily or annually? Any ideas? How many people a year do you think visit the Grand Bazaar? Millions, maybe?
5 million?
30 million.
Getting closer.
100? Seriously?
Oh,
100 million?
very, very close. 90 million people a year.
Oh.
About 250,000 to 400,000 a day. A 250,000 people a day visit this one marketplace. And then the last question in the quiz, when was this established? How long has this been around?
1,000 years ago.
We have a good range here, 100 years and 1,000 years. It's somewhere in the middle of those. It's actually about 500 years ago. 1450s is when this marketplace was built, and it's been continually built upon from the 1450s up through the 1700s. They continued to add to it, but that was when the core of this was built, and it's been operational ever since. So kind of interesting to think about that. Our most common tourist attraction is the marketplace. So a quick outline of how I'm going to do this presentation. First, I'll talk a little bit about who I am. I'll cover a little bit of basic vocabulary. I think most of you in here probably get the words I'll be using, but just in case, I want us all to be on the same page. I'll talk about the lens through which I'll be looking at marketplaces. I'll talk specifically about decentralized marketplaces once we get there. A little bit about the implications and potential use cases for them, where we are today with decentralized marketplaces and challenges we're facing, as well as how you can help or participate in decentralized marketplaces. So first, who am I? My name is Joshua Duchesne. I'm a blockchain educator and evangelist. I have a master's degree in education. I love sharing information with people and presenting on it, hence the reason I'm also a public speaker. I'm also an audio specialist, and so I love playing with sound as well. That's one of my pastimes, is music and sound design. I'm a contributor to a project called Giveth.io. We're a blockchain for social good nonprofit entity that's a decentralized altruistic community, building a platform that is going to re-engineer how charitable donations operate around the world. So using blockchain tech, we have accountability and transparency with donations. So this is one of the first projects that I joined in the blockchain space. I'm also the founder of Blockchain Audio Solutions. We do sonic branding and audio services for specifically blockchain-based organizations, because those are the people that I want to help. I identify as a decentralist, a voluntarist, an agorist, and I heart decentralized marketplaces and peer-to-peer transactions. I would love a world where everybody can exchange with one another voluntarily without the interruption or coercion of anybody else. All right, so the vocabulary. So these are my personal definitions that I'm going to give you. So these aren't designed necessarily to be universal, but for the sake of this topic, this is what we will be using. And also, if you're a person who likes to take notes, I'm actually giving you a sheet at the end here that has the slide deck on it, a link to that, so you don't have to take down all notes for all this kind of stuff here. All right, so first, decentralized marketplaces, we should talk about decentralized. My definition is that decentralized, these are systems with no central authority which function through the power of the interconnectivity of the individuals within the network. Marketplace, a place where anything of value can be exchanged between consenting parties. Trying to keep it nice and simple. The next term, technology. This is one that I like to clarify. I think that technology is simply any newly discovered or developed tool or way of thinking or doing that humans, through their actions, agree provides value to them individually or collectively, regardless of consequences. So technology, we often think of like cell phones or the fastest microprocessors, but I think it can be anything that we use as humans. It can even be a form of thought or a way of doing. The next definition I'm going to give is one I've been working on honing for a while. Everyone says, how do you define blockchain? And people always start, it's a distributed ledger that, and I say, no, I'm making a definition that does not use those two words in it, so we're gonna see how I do here. So my definition of blockchain, it's a recently developed technological tool, 2, that solves significant long-standing problems, 3, through a combination of cryptography, math, computer science, and game theory, 4, which allows us to do things we've never been able to do before. So thank you. It's very, very high level, very general, very encapsulating. And I'm all about open source and no IP, so you can use this wherever. But if you do, please do tag me, because I've worked really hard on developing this. So, all right. So the next definition that I'll put up here, emergent behavior. This is going to be important because I'm going to talk about how marketplaces, emergent behaviors occur in marketplaces due to technology. So emergent behaviors are behaviors that arise organically out of human interaction with a thing that weren't intentionally intended or anticipated by the creators of that thing. And lastly, smart contract. A lot of these platforms use this. So simply an unchangeable piece of code that executes a predetermined function when specific conditions are met. Pretty straightforward there. So yeah, now that we've got definitions pulled up here, the next thing I'll talk about is the lens through which I'm going to be addressing these ideas. I'll wait for awesome, get your photo, perfect. All right, so throughout human history, we've had various waves of technology, and they've greatly influenced the way that humans interact with the world around them, and they've resulted in numerous emergent behaviors. So my lens for this talk is waves of technology. I'm going to talk about how different waves of technology have affected marketplaces and the way that people interact with them. The first wave I'm going to talk about is agriculture and settlement. So going way, way, way back. Paleolithic era ends around 10,000-ish BC. We get the Neolithic era beginning. Humans start learning how to farm. They start establishing villages, settling in singular locations. As these villages begin to grow, we need to establish new mechanisms for trust in between individuals because you can no longer rely upon the community spirit of, if I go and give you shoes, you're definitely going to bring me food. Before you could rely upon that, now you need an actual mechanism for determining that exchange is really going to happen, because you no longer have this small tribe of trust. That's where we start to see people trading goods and services, and we get marketplaces beginning. We have central physical locations where vendors gather to buy and sell goods and services during specific times and days. And this evolves over the course of several thousand years. This doesn't all just happen at once, but it's during this general span of history where we begin to see this. And as early as 3000 BC, we see our very first documentation of city zoning for a bazaar. So 3000 BC, we have documentation that shows that city officials were thinking about, we need to have a dedicated place where people do these activities. And as early as 550 BC, there's evidence of permanent bazaars where they began to build actual structures in the city that were designed like, this is our actual city's bazaar. Anybody who comes here, you say, where do I go to buy goods and services? Go to that building over there, that's our bazaar. So humans have been interacting this way for a long time. So during this era, we get our very first marketplaces. We see access to a variety of goods increasing, especially as you have neighboring villages coming and visiting and seeing that they can bring their goods in and out. You start developing local networks. You start getting market economics. You start seeing the first signs of supply and demand really being important. Quality control. We talked about food sourcing here a moment ago. So you're going to see the very first time humans are starting to really, really think about that around this era. And reputation of vendors. These all start becoming a thing. Reputation didn't start with eBay and Amazon. It's existed for thousands of years. They just found a way to modernize it. The next major wave we see, international trade. So this is where you go from trading just within your village or nearby villages to making intentional trips carrying large quantities of goods to and from other locations, importing and exporting. So at this point, we start to see that there have been some governments that have arisen. Many of them are beginning to even back some of these trade companies. So you start seeing collectives, organizations, companies, and corporations start to form. East India Trading Company might be one you've heard of before. These companies start to form, and they get government backing. We get the rise of mercantilism. And so this is the first time we see strong government intervention in human trade, where they are determining who can trade where. You're going to give us X money for protecting you. It's basically a mafia situation here. And we have the first real large corporations begin to be established in this era. So this is the first time that we start seeing really large centralized marketplaces. The idea of the Grand Bazaar, that was established kind of during this era, like we mentioned in the mid-1400s. So at this point, we start seeing a wide range and diversity of goods from outside your specific city or region. And also with this, one thing that is an interesting, unique element of it that it brings to the people living in these regions that have these trade routes is that you start for the first time seeing more than just goods and services exchanged, but also culture. So here you're going to start adopting new culture. This is where you get art and music and even religion and ideas about ways of living are starting to be exchanged over mass distances. So the Silk Road, for example, is largely responsible for the proliferation of Buddhism throughout Southeast Asia. So you start seeing things like this really affecting the way that humans live. So the next major wave I'm going to talk about, industrialization. This is where we move from working primarily by hand to working primarily by machine. This is our first real introduction to what we'd consider to be modern day capitalism. We have a massive increase in productivity and output. We have a major rise in GDP and income levels across the board of any country that's participating in industrialization. We start to see what we would consider to be modern shops. So you start to see the pop-ups of actual storefronts, general stores, mall parks, places where you have regular established businesses that have display cases and changing rooms and a cashier up front. It's where you start to really see markets shift toward what we consider to be typical shopping experiences nowadays. You'll see regular business hours, all these sorts of things. You start also see household brands. So marketing becomes a thing now because you're no longer just a vendor promoting yourself and your wares. You are now recognizing the names of entire companies. You are seeing whatever Johnson & Johnson or Band-Aid or whatever. You're starting to see actual company names that you decide that you trust rather than just an individual. And also we begin to see much greater levels of competition and therefore much greater variety and decrease in the price of goods. As we produce more and more things, the price of each individual unit becomes smaller. The next major wave, communication. We begin to get robust, reliable, and cheap communications. The mail delivery service around the world is very, very strong. We have telephones introduced in the late 1800s. We see our very first mail order catalog in 1860, where you no longer have to leave your home to get a good. You can simply look at a catalog and send a thing by mail and receive the good to your home. This is revolutionary. You start getting to shop at home. Bringing the marketplace to you, you no longer go to it. So that's why I consider communications to be a major wave of tech that affects marketplaces. Also, this is a time where marketing begins to become its own industry. So out of marketplaces, a whole new industry arises. How do you convince people to buy your product? We can help you with that. We're a branding agency. This is particularly interesting to me because I do audio branding. So this is where you start to see the rise of jingles. So I'll hum a little familiar one for you and see if you get it. Tell me what company this is associated with. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it. Yes, I saw the golden arches in your eyes right away. Parasites, exactly. Parasitic Salad Co. and Brothers. Yeah, exactly. So we start to see new industries being developed specifically to market products. We also get, with the rise of televisions, we get things like ordering by phone things you see on the television. Home Shopping Network rises out of this. That's an enormous organization, rises out of this wave of communication. The next big wave, which is sort of nested in communication, but I think it deserves its own slide, is the internet. So this is a relatively recent phenomenon, as you all might be aware. This gives us, for the first time, access to free and instantaneous information and communication at any time, any place around the world. So we are suddenly connected all the time. And when you start adding technology like smartphones to this, now everybody has access to a global marketplace in their pocket at any moment. Right now, if one of you that's speaking this afternoon forgot an important thing for your presentation, you could go onto Amazon Prime now, order it, have it delivered, and have it ready to go without ever leaving the comfort of your chair. You could be doing it right now, and I wouldn't even know. That's what she's doing. She's ordering something on Amazon Prime now, and she's going to get it for her presentation later. So with the internet, we start seeing the rise of online marketplaces. This is a major change. We get sites like eBay, Etsy, Amazon. We get places like Craigslist and OfferUp that allow people to offer up secondhand goods. We get rental and lease organizations like Airbnb, Car2Go, where you can rent something or lease something temporarily very, very easily through an app on your phone. You get gig services like Rover. We get other services like Uber and Lyft. All these things arise out of the internet becoming a thing. These are all emergent behaviors of humans finding better ways to use this tool to do cool things that benefit us. Again, regardless of consequence, as I mentioned before. So with this, some of the major changes to the individual user is that the cost of becoming a merchant drops dramatically. as does the cost of any goods found on these sites. You suddenly have selection of all the products in the world, which means you have to lower your price point to be competitive. You have to increase your quality to be competitive. You start getting faster shipping times. You start getting better return policies. So the consumer experience improves dramatically with the rise of the internet, because everybody is now competing on a global stage for the most part. With this, there are some of the first times we see major drawbacks to an improvement in marketplaces, however. We have problems with fraud and ID theft. We have major hacks and data breaches where your information for these marketplaces is stored on a centralized server. Right now, every single one of us has our social security number, our credit card information, our address, our age, our data, like all this data about us is all over the world on these centralized servers. And these are honeypots for hackers to come, steal that information, and then use it for nefarious purposes or sell it to the highest bidder. So this is one of the major cons we experience with this system. And even though this system seems like it gives us some peer-to-peer transactions, like eBay seems like you're interacting peer-to-peer, like, oh, I'm buying this thing from this guy. Really all this is a facade over top of a very traditional large centralized business model. So it's kind of superficial. You're still beholden to the centralized platforms. You're still beholden to their rules, their fees, the control of what you can and can't post, the control of how your branding and your page looks, the control of all of your information. So these are not panacea by any means at all, but it is a major improvement. So the next major wave, the one that I'm most excited about and what brought me here, distributed ledger technology, or blockchain being a type of distributed ledger technology. This wave, I think, has the opportunity to really revolutionize the way we do business around the world. And so I'll go into much more detail about this since this is the main thing I'm here for. So with distributed ledger technology and blockchain technology, we get the rise and availability of decentralized marketplaces. We can now make marketplaces completely decentralized. We don't need centralized bodies anymore, and people are working hard at making this happen. So some of the features that you'll find in decentralized marketplaces, and this is where I really get excited here. So number one, these are disintermediated. These are completely peer-to-peer. You're no longer dealing with a central authority. There's no body in between you and the person you're transacting with. There's an open source or free-to-use platform that allows you to make exchanges, and you can do it using cryptocurrency directly from one to another, see the transaction on a blockchain. This is for the first time we can really do this outside of being in person and exchanging physical cash or a physical good. We see that we have low or zero fees, which is very different from a lot of these other big platforms I mentioned. A lot of sellers on those platforms often complain about how high the fees are, 10%, 20% on some of these platforms. Some charge monthly fees to use them. With a decentralized marketplace, we now have the opportunity to charge zero fees. And this is beneficial to both buyers and sellers, obviously. A seller can decrease their price point by 5% and still be 5% cheaper than what they sold it for before. So they can earn more profit and sell for less to the consumer. We get lower prices, I just mentioned that. These are unrestricted, and so anybody can use a decentralized marketplace, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you are, regardless of what you look like, how old you are. Any of these factors of identity don't really matter. As long as you have access to basic data and the ability to put your stuff up on the marketplace, you can use these marketplaces. And you need a shipping network if you're selling physical goods, obviously. But these are lowering the bar of entry for people, and this is where we start to see my whole global equalizer part. This is the first part of this where I start to lead into where this is going. We have uncensored. So we now have unfettered access to anything the two consenting parties believe is of value. But right underneath that, I think it's important to put that these are community regulated. So since these are decentralized, there's no centralized body to come in and tell you, you can't post this thing, you can't have this thing on there, you can't show this thing, we deem this bad. This is up to communities now to regulate. So for the first time, the market is truly deciding what is good and what is bad to have on a marketplace. So if there's something that we agree in general, people do not think is worth having on a marketplace, you're going to have a swarm of people trying to prevent somehow that from being on a marketplace, and you get democratization, like actual democratization of what goes on a marketplace. We've got voluntary dispute resolution. So a lot of these centralized marketplaces, one big great feature they have is great dispute resolutions. Like if there's a problem with something on eBay, they have an amazing automated system to determine who is, in the right here and who gets the refund. PayPal being a payment processor is very good about sending refunds for things if there's a problem. So we have to find ways to do that on our own in these marketplaces because we're not relying upon these central structures. So we have voluntary dispute resolution as one way that we're finding seems to work pretty well. The fact that these are done on blockchain using smart contracts helps a lot because you don't have as much gray area around did the transaction go through. It's pretty clear cut it either did or it didn't because you can see the transaction on the blockchain. But still, this is really valuable to have. You could pay a moderator to come in on a case if you didn't know who was really in the right. These are borderless. So we are not restricted by borders anymore. There are countries where you can't use certain platforms, certain tools, certain applications. These are entirely borderless. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, as long as you have data access, you can interact with a decentralized marketplace. So this, again, is opening up access to people where there previously was not access to these tools. Individuals have total control and ownership over both their personal data and information. So you've got information security now. You're not inputting credit card data onto one of these sites because you're probably paying with cryptocurrency. So you're not going to have your credit card information stolen. You don't need to put your social security number in there. In fact, you could be completely anonymous, but still have reputation built in tied to your identifier, but not necessarily your name, your address, your social, any of these things. So you get the best of both worlds, anonymity and reputation. As well as the individuals having control and ownership, you get brand security. Your brand is no longer affected by what the platform decides you can and can't do, can and can't say. It's up to the community to determine what you can and can't do and can and can't say and what they're willing to pay for. And if they don't like what you're doing, you're going to find that really quickly reflected in your sales. So very different than having centrally regulated platforms. You now have community regulated platforms. These are community imposed regulations. Again, this is the whole point of democratization of marketplaces. We also have, I talked about using cryptocurrencies, which gives us a bunch of benefits like smart contracts, multi-sigs, complete clear records of the transactions, flexible terms. So on a lot of platforms that currently exist, centralized platforms, there's this list of terms and conditions you have to check. Anytime you go on any of these platforms, check my terms and conditions, I agree to this, and no one ever reads that. On a decentralized marketplace, these terms are flexible, just like they would be with any other peer-to-peer interaction. If I wanted to exchange my phone with somebody in this room for some other thing of value, we would determine how we did that. A decentralized marketplace gives us that same freedom, that same ability to have flexible terms that we determine between the two individuals voluntarily exchanging. No chargeback fraud, that's just another nice little feature due to cryptocurrencies. And then I mentioned smartphone apps specifically because as cell phone and data technology rapidly spreads around the world, more and more people will, through a simple app on their phone, be able to access these marketplaces. Now, we're not at 100% coverage yet, but we are moving very quickly toward most people in the world having access to data and smartphones. More people right now in the world have access to data and smartphones than they do to bank accounts by a large number. And of those bank accounts that do exist, I was doing some research and I found that a large number of bank accounts in developing countries are completely inactive. They've been opened as parts of programs to get our country banked, for example, but nobody uses the bank account because they have no reason or way to access it. So with this, we no longer need bank accounts to even be a thing. We can completely circumvent that entire system. So some of the implications and use cases of decentralized marketplaces. What I've talked about is a bit about physical goods, buying and selling like an eBay or an Etsy or an Amazon. I also talked about markets like Uber, Lyft, those sorts of things, Airbnb, services. You can put anything on a decentralized marketplace. Anything that two parties find is of value to exchange, you can put on a decentralized marketplace. And this is where it comes down to curation. So curators are going to be responsible for basically determining what you see when you're on a decentralized marketplace. So these platforms very generally are places just like a table where you could toss a bunch of stuff. Like let's say this table is a decentralized marketplace and all I want to look for is tech items. Well, it's not going to show me my empty coffee cup or the plant that's behind the laptop screen, but it will show me the laptop, the camera, the battery, and this charger. So essentially what a curator will do is they'll give you sort of a lens to look through on the marketplace and only pull up stuff related to what you're searching, sort of like a regular search algorithm was do. But the difference is you can build an entire overlay to this. So you could build like business shoes are us on top of a decentralized marketplace, and your platform would automatically curate for business style shoes. And those business style shoes, however, they're not refined or confined to just appearing on that one platform. Somebody else that has footwear for all, their website also curates some of those same shoes in. So once you post your item on a decentralized marketplace, it is there. It's not censorable. It can't be removed, and the curators will show you that item. Now, this is very different from what we have right now, where if you had let's say this laptop, you wanted to post it online to sell, you'd have to post it on eBay individually, agree to their terms of service, give them your information. Etsy, same thing. Amazon, same thing. OfferUp, Craigslist, any site you wanted to post this on, you'd have to do an individual posting, give that site, that centralized authority, all of your information, and anybody interacting with you would have to agree to their terms, deal with the intermediation done by that centralized authority, pay the fees, all the processes involved with that. But if you put that on a single decentralized marketplace, there could be 30 websites that are all dedicated to seeking different things, and they would curate down to that laptop, appearing on different sites. People in different parts of the world could look at completely different websites and see the same laptop for sale, and you didn't have to post it 30 different times. You didn't have to give anybody your information. So this is suddenly starting to seem bigger and bigger. This is providing us many, many opportunities and great potentials. We can also, on decentralized marketplaces, more easily build communities around specific interests, ideas, or causes. Many of these decentralized marketplaces that I've seen in the works are in the process of adding community aspects to them, adding social media aspects. So you could start developing fan followings, almost like a YouTuber would around their gaming, for example. A YouTube gamer gets a fan following. Well, what if you were also a game seller and you also have a following? You can now start to blend your social media presence with the items you sell on a marketplace. This opens up a ton of potential opportunities, emergent behaviors. You could have communities that are built around this. You could have a community on a marketplace that focuses on particular goods and crafts from a specific region, and within that have a social aspect. So people that come and visit that region, they see, oh, I went to, let's say it's Thailand. Let's say you went to Chiang Mai. I love Chiang Mai. You go to Chiang Mai, you take pictures of the night market. You have some vendors that are on a decentralized marketplace. You can share about them on your little curated community, and people find that, they get interested, they start buying from those vendors on this decentralized marketplace. You develop whole communities around specific ideas or causes or interests or items or crafts or services. We have huge potential for developing countries, and this is where I really start getting excited. So we have all these key pieces here. We have disintermediated, decentralized. It doesn't care how old you are, it doesn't care who you are. You don't have to have a bank account anymore. You can sell anything. You use cryptocurrency, so there's no money exchange fee when things come in and out of the country. No government can tell you what you can and can't do. This gives the potential for people in areas with high levels of economic and political unrest and oppression the opportunity to join the global e-commerce system for the first time ever. They're not confined by the current behemoth organizations and entities that might not have the permission from the governments or corporations in those regions to participate. They're no longer confined by the fact that they might be too young to legally open a bank account or run a business. None of this matters anymore. It doesn't matter if they're able or disabled, their race or religion. None of this matters anymore. Anybody can have access to this. We get banking access. So you have, I mentioned banking versus smartphone data is how we have more people with smartphones and data than banks. People can now bank on their phone using a cryptocurrency wallet, and they don't need to even worry about a central bank going and giving up all their information, having the chance for their wages to be gouged or stolen or their currency to hyperinflate. Again, I talked about identity doesn't matter anymore, access to unrestricted global markets. So I have some examples here that I get super hyped about, just ideas in my head brewing about who could use this. So one example I like to give to people, let's say that there's a young person in a country with hyperinflation. Let's just say that we have a young girl in Venezuela. Let's say she's 9 or 10 years old. Let's say she's disabled too. Let's give an extreme example to make a point. So let's say we have a disabled young girl in Venezuela. Her family's barely making enough to pay for her medical expenses and the food for the family, barely enough to get by. Their currency is hyperinflating. This is a potentially very real situation. I probably am talking about more than one person in the world right now without knowing it. So this person does exist. Let's say that she wants to help somehow, but she doesn't know how. She feels like she's kind of a burden on the family. She wants to find a way to help. She can't really go sell goods at the local market, or if she does, the money that she earns is hyperinflated away by that afternoon. She's left with very few options. There's not much she can do. She happens to find a decentralized marketplace. A friend of hers has a smartphone with data and says, hey, check this out. And she says, well, I've always liked writing handmade poetry, and then I draw pretty pictures on the border of it. I wonder if anybody would buy that. So her friend snaps a couple pictures, helps her set up a wallet, and she posts it on a decentralized marketplace. And lo and behold, somebody thinks it's cute and buys it for $5 US. Not a lot of money to us, but to this girl, that might be enough to feed her whole family for a week. And suddenly, she has access to the globe of e-commerce. She can suddenly be a productive member of her family and provide for people, herself, and those around her. And she now has access to the same tools that have made Western nations rich for centuries, all because of blockchain technology and decentralized marketplaces. So if we can see this happening around the world in many different situations, let's say we have a craft seller at a street market in Cambodia. She's selling goods that she hand produces and tries to feed her family. She can also join these decentralized marketplaces, and suddenly it's not just the tourists entering her little street market or the corner that she's confined to. It's anybody who happens to come across her goods on this marketplace. And again, she has total access to it. Doesn't matter if she has a bank account or not. Doesn't matter what she looks like, if she's able or disabled. None of these things matter about her identity. The only thing that matters is that somebody else wants to buy a good that she produces and sells. That's all that matters anymore. We've stripped down all the barriers, and suddenly competition is ripped wide open to the entire globe, and anybody can participate. I have other examples on here. An elderly couple, let's just say they're in Poland, we'll just say, and they're retired, but they're not really doing super well. They can offer to pick up tourists from the airport, drive them to their home, host them, do Airbnb style stuff, give them a tour of the city, paid for all with cryptocurrency. And they don't have to use Uber, they don't have to use Airbnb, and they don't have to use whatever other system you'd have to use to make all those transactions happen. So just more and more examples. We can build whole systems like a Airbnb. That could be a site that you build that sits over top of a decentralized marketplace, and all it does is it scrapes for people that are offering short-term homestays, paid for with cryptocurrency, anywhere in the world, no platform fee. Same thing with CryptoCab. Let's say you live in a city like New York City and they have a medallion system. And so they artificially inflate the price of using a cab through this system and eliminate competition. Well, suddenly on a decentralized platform, they can't come to anybody and tell you, oh, hey, Uber, you have to stop allowing your drivers to drive here. You can't tell the decentralized marketplace that. It doesn't care. Those listings are on there, and you literally have to have a police officer walking up to every single person entering any vehicle and saying, are you using a medallion licensed taxi, an Uber, or a crypto cab? And there's not the resource to do that. So suddenly you are forcing markets open. You're forcing down prices again. As we've seen throughout my previous slides about the history of marketplaces, anytime markets become more open and have more access and there's more competition, prices lower, incomes rise, you get all these effects, and they can happen in parts of the world where they've been restricted from happening before because of political and economic coercion and regulation. Those things are no longer a barrier anymore, so these people now have access to these things. Community collaboration, post-disaster regional support. It'd be very easy to develop communities around, let's say that every year when there's a giant tsunami that unfortunately affects a region, you could have entire communities that are focused on, hey everybody, we're gonna redirect you to this region's decentralized marketplace for like the next month and support them. You can fundraise essentially by buying crap that you like. And you know that people love to feel good when they buy things. Look at Tom's shoes. That business model was genius. Buy a pair of shoes, give a pair of shoes. I can feel really good about my hot new kicks. Like, people love being able to do that. You could have entire communities that are built just around featuring a new disaster-laden region and helping these people earn back enough money to rebuild themselves, because you know that our aid is going to take months and months to get there if the US sends people over, assuming they even help at all and know what they're doing once they arrive. And that's an entirely different problem that I've talked about before and will in the future. But for now, decentralized marketplaces are one great way we can help with even things like this. All right, so where are we today? We're in the early stages of developing decentralized marketplaces. There are a few that are operational right now, and many others that are being developed and will be coming online within the coming months and years. Right now, though, we're kind of in a niche user phase. This is like pre-mass adoption by far. Most people I've seen on the current decentralized marketplace platforms are people who are already into cryptocurrencies and who already identify as like agorists or anarchists. So right now it's a very niche audience. It's kind of like Bitcoin was in 2011. So very similar looking audience. And we still have a lot of challenges and many unknowns. So I'll quickly describe some of the marketplaces we have right now. So Open Bazaar. This to me is by far the most complete and robust decentralized marketplace. Right now they have a desktop client, and don't know if they yet have their web client available, but they're working on that if they don't. And their smartphone app is in production right now as well. So I would say keep checking back with OpenBazaar. Use it right now because the desktop client is really cool. But keep checking back over the coming months over the winter, and we'll soon have the smartphone app, and that is when things are really going to take off. So they allow for the usage of cryptocurrencies, obviously, to purchase and buy and sell goods on the platform. They're also a decentralized exchange. So because you can buy and sell and trade anything, OpenBazaar itself is a decentralized exchange, just as an emergent property of being a decentralized marketplace that allows for any cryptocurrency to be used. So that alone is pretty freaking awesome. Let's see, so I'll continue moving on here. Syscoin, block market. I tried using that one. I was having a Java error, so I don't actually know how it operates, but I've seen video of it, and it looks kind of similar to OpenBazaar. I still think OpenBazaar has better search algorithms and allows you to actually pick different search engines. So I was talking about the curation, looking at this table. They already have different search engines you can plug into OpenBazaar's platform to bring up different types of goods and services. So like OB1 is the name of the company that is heading the open source development on the platform. If you use their search engine, you only see like good, wholesome legal things. But there are some search engines you could use to see things that you maybe wouldn't find on Amazon or Etsy or eBay. And the community determines whether those things are worth having up there or not. And you still have reputation, like I said. Swarm City, this is a really cool project. It's coming soon. They're not up and running yet. I think they have like their early beta is like functional, but they don't have it open to the public yet. But they're really cool. I met their developers at Burning Man this year, and they are really, really rad. They get the vision. They are total like anarchist decentralists. Like they totally get it, and so they're going to be pretty awesome. Watch out for that. Bitstash, BitBay, NXT, these are all operational as well, but NXT is just a digital marketplace, and I haven't really used these ones much to see how they work. And lastly, I put Giveth on here. This is a project I mentioned I worked for before, so full disclosure, I do some work with these guys. We're in closed beta, but one thing I find interesting about this is I mentioned how marketplaces could be for anything. We're basically becoming a charitable works marketplace. So for people that want to feel empowered as a doer or as a donor, as a giver, somebody who makes a world change, we're building a marketplace for you to come and find projects to donate to or find projects to contribute to with your skill sets. So again, this is part of this whole ecosystem of decentralization. So some of the challenges we're facing here. Right now, one of the biggest issues that I see is we still have centralized shipping, and we still have physical borders, not physical, but they're borders that are imaginary lines that many people would consider them to be sort of a physical hard line where they don't allow things to come in and out of. So that is one of our hangups right now. We have decentralized marketplaces, but not decentralized shipping. So we're still reliant upon whether or not some company or organization will ship it, or whether some government will allow you to ship things through a border. So that's a big challenge we're still facing. Like I said, content curation is key. Right now, there aren't a whole lot of platforms built over top of decentralized marketplaces to do this yet, but as people begin to see the value in it, I think we'll see a massive rise in that. There's limited marketplaces available, like I saw on the last slide. There aren't a whole lot open yet, but that's all with time and development, so we'll get there. Education and onboarding. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help educate people about the fact that these exist, that they're going to continue to exist, that they're going to enable people around the world to have great opportunities, and helping to onboard people onto these platforms. So when I get the opportunity, I try to help people download the OpenBazaar client, open it up, set up their wallet, show them how it works, post their first listing, all this kind of stuff. So this is something that we can all help with as well. User experience. Most of these platforms are built by coders and developers and idealists who see the value of decentralized marketplaces, and not necessarily UX experts and humans that are using them on the other end. So this is an area we're still facing challenges, but again, working on it. Branding and marketing. This is a huge one. To develop the kind of reputation that sites like Amazon have, that eBay have, that Etsy have, it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of hard work with branding, a lot of hard work with marketing to let people know that these are good, safe places to be. We have to come a long way from the Silk Road. The Silk Road gave a big bad name to the idea of decentralized marketplaces, and it wasn't really decentralized because it was stored on an essential server, which was its big fail point. So we have to come a long way to show people that no, Bitcoin's not just used to buy drugs. The Silk Road was its own little experiment. We've taken what we've learned from that, and we're building global marketplaces for anybody to access, changing the narrative so that people don't have that same stigma associated with them. Translations to these other countries I keep talking about. Right now, a lot of these platforms are being built by people who speak English natively, so they're building them for people who are native English speakers. Of course they would. We need to have people that are coming in early to help translate and also to talk about the difference in the way that cultures interact with marketplaces in general, with apps, with what is allowed, what is required, what is expected, because people around the world have different experiences and different designs and different desires of usage. So that's an area we have to put a lot of focus on. The value of the platforms versus the philosophy. A lot of people like me will come up here and I'll preach about the values of decentralization and disintermediation and peer-to-peer transactions and voluntarism and all these sorts of things. And you all are like, yeah, that's awesome because you're in this room. But most people out there outside of this room don't really care about those things. They want to see, oh, I can sell stuff and not pay a 10% fee? Okay, I'll use that. Oh, the UI is not as good. I'm going to go back to Amazon. That 10% fee is worth it. We've got to make things that are bigger and better and faster and cooler and operate just as well with a little extra touch than the current platforms if we want adoption. We can't compete with philosophy. We've got to compete with providing real value to consumers. Cryptocurrency volatility and usability. This is still a really big problem. One of my biggest concerns about using cryptocurrencies as mediums of exchange. The value of the currency is related to the market's whims of, well, what cryptocurrencies are doing in general and to that project. So wouldn't it be kind of weird if I said, cool, my old cruddy iPhone is just dying. Look at this thing, it's sad, my old 5S, cracked screen, garbage. I want to get a new one, but oh crap, people really like Apple, their stock went up double. That means iPhones now cost twice as much. Like, wouldn't that be weird if an iPhone doubled in price because Apple's stock doubled in price? That's what we're currently at with cryptocurrencies. So that's kind of a weird way to do things. If you wanted to onboard, you're paying more than you did if you bought in a week ago. If the price is going, that's just silly to me. So we've got to find a way to get around that. Stablecoins are cool. I'm not going to speculate on whether we're going to have one that seems to be working and ubiquitous anytime soon. Lastly, this is a fear that I hope doesn't come to fruition, but potential retaliation against users, developers, people that are using these platforms in countries where they're really grasping for power and they're losing it quickly. I'm afraid that we'll see military action against people that are using these platforms. And it might be hard to find who is and isn't using them. But I just have a fear that we see that. I really hope we don't anywhere in the world ever. But that's something we have to be prepared to deal with. All right. Lastly, how you can help and contribute. Basically deal with the problems I just showed you on that last slide. Help educate more people about this. Send them to my slide deck. I actually have little papers here. Well, I'll give you, it has the slide deck on there. Send them to that and be like, oh, cool, yeah, you should look this stuff up. Show them how to use Bazaar. Use these platforms yourself. Go on, put a few bucks on your Bazaar account and buy one of their t-shirts or a sticker or something. Just start using them so that you get comfortable with them yourself. So that way you can talk about them from an educated perspective as well, and that you are ready for the next big wave when you see it coming. Share these ideas with people, onboard others, advocate for them, contribute your skills. If you have a particular skill set that solves one of these problems, bring it to the table, talk to people, get on. Bazaar is open. And I keep using them as an example because I know that company better than any of these other ones. But you can get onto their Slack channel and be like, hey, I want to build a tool that allows you to have a native wallet rather than one that only uses a native wallet for any cryptocurrency rather than one that only uses Bitcoin, Zcash, blah, blah, blah. And they'd say, cool, yeah, here, give us, here's our code base. You can fork it or you can just add to it or whatever. So get in there and contribute. They want you to. Build decentralized shipping networks. If somebody can do that, that'd be really awesome because we need that. Develop curation platforms. That's an area that we're lacking. So lots of different ways you can contribute. So that wraps up the core of my presentation. I have 1 minute left according to my timer. Is there any single question that someone might want to ask? Yeah.
It seems a dichotomy. Various countries are banning cryptocurrencies, the so-called Bitcoin, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yet they're very enthusiastic about blockchain. To me, that's a dichotomy because it's like buying a Mercedes-Benz and not having the tires to drive it.
Yeah, yeah. Blockchain, not Bitcoin, is what I hear people say, and that bugs me because they were developed simultaneously.
Well, how could you get to the blockchain without the cryptocurrencies as the fiat to get there?
Yeah, I mean,
this confuses me.
Yeah, I mean, you could have a third-party payment solution that immediately converts your fiat into crypto on
you
the
still have to
platform,
pay
and
for it.
then yeah, exactly, yeah. So
paying
you're
for
still
something.
you're still dealing with a centralized system in the middle. Yeah, I mean, this is I guess a challenge I should have put up. The countries are trying to ban cryptocurrencies, which clearly we all know that you can't really do that, but you can ban certain aspects of them, like ICOs or marketing or that kind of stuff. So
I guess governments, countries,
Mhm.
individuals, they want to control. And the blockchain is not controllable by
Yep.
any one country, company, or person.
True that. 100%. That's why decentralized marketplaces all the way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all very much. Here's my information, and here's what the slide deck will be. Yeah. And if anybody wants one, I'll just leave these on a table at the back, and you can grab it. It has my information.
You are here, correct? You will be here.
Yep.
Ah.
Yeah, I'll be around afterward too. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead and ask me questions or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
I'll be here all day, folks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you so.
Please,
Oh,
this is a
sweet.
certificate.
Yeah, I'm putting this on my wall. Yeah, I'm holding it in front of my camera. Yeah. Ah, beautiful. This is cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.